Wouldn't it be nice if you could just enjoy the gift for a little while and then one day it would just magically disappear? No need to worry about storing it or feel guilty about tossing it out later. That sounds like the perfect gift to me, but I guess that's a lot to ask for. And I still don't know what to do for my friends for the holidays. Oh, you're gonna love this. Okay, I promised in the last video that I was gonna make a product this time, and I'm gonna stick to it. That being said, this is not the direction I thought things were gonna go, but I've given it a lot of thought, and here's what I'm proposing. What I'm suggesting is that we turn these into one of these. Okay, I know what you're thinking, but hear me out on this one. Candles are pretty cool in their own right. It's just this little bundle of energy that just needs a catalyst to get going, and you get heat and light. They come in all kinds of shapes and sizes, different colors, different scents. And once their fuel is used up, there's not a whole lot left to throw out, and that can't be said for a lot of other things that take up space in our lives. Since I can leverage the fact that this can be any shape or size, it means I can take this iconic shape and bring these two things together. Now you might be asking, why the Lego? And the reason is that for a lot of us nerds out there, these little magical interlocking blocks hold a really special place in our heart. They allowed us to explore our ingenuity, our creativity, and even more importantly, it introduced us to a world of precision that has influenced the entire arc of my life. Now, as an adult, I'd be lying if I said I didn't still play with these from time to time, but it might be nice to have something a little bit more sophisticated to add to the shelf. So let's make a plan and see if we can make this work. So here's the general plan. There's essentially 7 things that we need to do. First thing we need to do is get our hands on some Legos and take some measurements. We need to find out exactly what the proportions are of all the sides and angles so that we can take that information and turn that into a 3D model. Once the model is complete and it's the way we want, we can use that model to scale up and down depending on the size that we want the final outcome to be. After we have our head wrapped around that, we'll use that model to make a 3D print. Once the print comes out, we're gonna need to do some finish work to get those nice smooth sides. Once we have the 3D print smoothed out the way we want, we can take that to the next step, which is gonna be to build the mold. This is where we will pour our silicone. Once the mold sets up, that will allow us to move on to the next step, which is going to be to pour wax. Once we've poured the wax and we've allowed it to cool, we'll be able to remove that and we should have our finished candle. Okay, I finally got a 3D printout that I'm happy with. Now I need to do some finish work on it, and the reason is that I'm going to be using silicone to make the molds for the candles. And the silicone is very unforgiving. It picks up every detail that's in the surface. So right now you can hear the little ridges on the side. The silicone will definitely pick that up, so when I pour the wax, it'll definitely pick up those lines, and I don't want that. I really want that nice, smooth, plasticky surface. So unfortunately, that just means some finish work. I will be sanding, but I've actually found that with these big planar surfaces, the best tool for the job is actually to use a good old-fashioned file. And I found that this works great for removing material quickly, but also keeping the surface flat. Once I'm done with the file, I'll switch over to the sandpaper to get a nice smooth surface. I'll start at 320 and I may even work my way down to 600. Once again, we're gonna sand. It just seems like there's always sanding to do, so we're just gonna get to it. This brings me to a point that I think is really important. The success of this piece relies heavily on all of the prep work that we're putting in now. I think it's tempting to get it to just good enough, but I grew up in an auto body shop where prep work was paramount. You'd spend hours and hours and hours getting something really smooth and flat just so that you could spend 5 minutes spraying something over the top of it. But paying attention to the details really makes a difference, and I think it's going to come through in this piece. If the sides are not flat and smooth, it's just not going to have the look and feel that I want. So I just got to suck it up and do the work. Take a look at that. That's going to come out great. Here, just for context, here's a print that I didn't do any finish work on. You can totally see the difference and hear it. Now we're ready to make a mold. Here's the finished positive. This is essentially what the candles will look like once they come out of the mold. We're gonna need a nice, flat, smooth surface. Then we're gonna take our object and attach that to the flat surface. I've put a hole in the bottom of this so I can literally just drill a hole and just screw it down. Next, I need to cut some material that preferably is super smooth and flat. This is because I want the silicone to release really easily, and I'll be using a releasing agent, but the smoother and flatter the better. I think I have some old melamine shelves laying around, and those will work great. Essentially what we're gonna do is we're gonna build a little barrier all the way around our positive, like that. And then we can fill this part with the silicone, let that cure, and when it's done, we'll pull the sides off, pull the whole thing off, pull the plug out, and we'll be left with a silicone mold, if everything goes to plan. Okay, I got all the pieces cut on the table saw. I was able to find that old melamine shelf I was talking about. This is gonna work great. The silicone won't stick to this. The next thing I need to do is find the center of this so that I can attach my piece directly to this and screw it down. This is filled with air. And if I pour the silicone in here and it's not attached to the bottom, it could float right up. And once that happens, it's basically over. I just have to start over again. I wanna make sure that's locked down nice and tight, and then I can use, sorry. Then I can use the walls, and I can set these up. I'll clamp everything down nice and tight, and then I'll be ready to pour the silicone. So this is the silicone I'm gonna use for this project. This is called Moldstar 16 Fast. So it has a relatively fast cure time. It's a really easy, user-friendly kind of silicone. It's mixed 1-to-1 by volume. So you just pour out equal amounts, mix them together really thoroughly, and then pour them in. I'm gonna try to get at least a couple of molds out of here so that I can be pouring more than one mold at a time. Might be able to squeeze out 3, but we'll see where we get. All right, let's get to work. Okay, I've called a little bit of an audible on this one. Originally, I had planned to just mount this straight to the bottom plate, and that would leave a nice big opening for pouring in the wax. Now, I haven't poured a lot of wax, certainly not to make candles, but I have cast a lot of other things. And I do know that especially when you're heating up the material that's going to become the casting, that expands, and then as it cools, it contracts. And I'm concerned that if I leave it a big opening at the bottom, when I pour the wax in there, it will start to shrink and concave that bottom surface. So I printed a little extra cone here. I'm gonna add this on to the bottom, and that way I can fill this with wax. As it starts to cool, if it needs to pull some of that wax down, it'll pull it from the cone and not from the main body of the piece. That means there'll be a little bit of cleanup in terms of like cutting off that cone. But what it won't mean is that either I have a candle with a big dip in the bottom or that I have to add more material later. So I think this is gonna end up being the faster way. Kind of looks like a little satellite or something. Okay, this is beautiful, except for I forgot one thing. I actually need to drill a hole in the top of this piece so that I can put in a piece of 16-inch stainless steel rod. That's so that when I pour the silicone, there'll be a hole in the top, and I'm gonna use that to thread the wick through so that I can pour this upside down. So I have to take this apart. All right, we're all set to mix and pour the silicone. I've got everything out that I need. Basically what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna spray a little mold release in here to get that going. That will help the silicone separate from the part as well as the flask walls. Then I'm just gonna mix these 1-to-1. It sets up really fast, which is gonna be great for me. I'd like to make more than one. I would not use this if I was making a much bigger mold. It's just too fast. I'm gonna get my gloves on and start mixing some silicone. Okay, I got about 300 milliliters. Looking at this now, I think I might have actually mixed more than I need, but it's always kind of hard to tell. But you really want to make sure you scrape down the sides, get all of that color to blend together. Sometimes you'll see people put these in a degasser, or they basically put it in a vacuum and they pull all the big bubbles out. This stuff just cures way too fast for that. I'm just gonna mix this up really well, and then what I'm gonna do is pour it really long, and because that stretches out that flow as it goes down, it helps to pop some of those bigger bubbles. I think that looks pretty good. All right, it looks like 400 milliliters is gonna do the trick. It's gonna start catalyzing pretty quickly, and then we'll come back and demold it in a couple hours. Well, good news, the silicone is cured. Now, I purposefully bought a fast curing silicone because I really wanted to move this project along. But of course, all the life stuff happens, and I'm actually back here the next day, hence the different shirt. But it is what it is. So we're gonna pull this mold out of the flask. We'll pull the positive out, inspect the inside, and if everything looks good, we'll be ready to pour some wax. Imagine what that would be like if there was no release agent. It's kind of like surface tension, so you just got to break that a little bit. It comes right off. That's going to be where the wick goes in. Now you can see the plug on the inside. Probably going to need to split this. So I'm going to need my X-Acto. Now what I'm actually going to need to do is make some cuts in the molds, because I need to be able to peel this open so that it makes it easier to get the wax out. I need to be careful. I don't want to cut too deep or too far. The more cuts there are, the more places for wax to go, and that can just mean a lot of cleanup. So I want to minimize it as much as possible. All right, I think we're ready to pour some wax. All right, well, we've reached the part of this project where I'm officially outside of my area of expertise. I've been making molds for a long time, and I was about 90% sure that that was going to go relatively smoothly. I don't know anything about making candles or pouring wax, so at this point we're relying on whatever information I could get off the internet at 11 o'clock at night when my kids were asleep. It basically seems pretty straightforward. We need to melt some wax, add some color, pour the wax in the mold, and we're ready to go. But my gut is telling me that it's a little bit more nuanced than that, and we're probably going to have to solve a few problems along the way. The part that makes me the most nervous is the color. I'm good at a lot of things, but unfortunately color is not one of them. Every time I've tried to mess with color, it's always been a disaster. This is one of those situations where it's important to know thyself. And I know that if I mess around with the color, it's gonna be bad. I'm gonna solve this by resigning myself to only use single colors. There will be no mixing. Now, the downside to that is that I thought it would be really cool to be able to match the original colors. But I think in the interest of simplicity, we're gonna stick with what's in the bag, and that will be that. I was able to get more than one mold poured, so I can actually melt a big batch of wax, pour multiple candles, and let those cool all at once. Then change the color and repeat, and basically just go until we run out of wax. Honestly, this part makes me really nervous. I'm just one of those kind of people where if it doesn't turn out exactly the way I want, I just get really frustrated and I think it's a failure. And I need to get over that, because I think even if this doesn't turn out exactly as I imagine, or if it doesn't look exactly like this, it's still gonna be pretty cool. And I think that has value. So I'm gonna see this through to the end, and we're gonna see what comes out, and then we'll see what everybody else thinks. Okay, let's melt some wax. All right, the instructions that I got with the dye says that I can mix 0.08 to 0.2 ounces of dye for every 2.2 pounds of wax. So, of course, that's not confusing at all. So I think what we're gonna do is we're gonna melt 1.5 pounds of wax. I'll add in a whole packet of color. We'll get that blended together, and then we can start pouring candles. And hopefully what we'll get is a nice, deep, true color. I thought 1.5 pounds was gonna be a lot more wax. While we're waiting for the wax to melt, there's one thing I need to address, which is that I need to run a wick through each of the molds before I pour the wax. That way the wick will be embedded in the candle when it's done. However, what that means is that there's going to be a little piece of wick that's sticking out of the bottom. So I think what I might need to do is find some more of that melamine shelf and maybe take a Forstner bit and just bore out a little bit of a depression so that I can set this on there and it can be nice and flat when I pour, but have some room for the wick to stick out. After I got the first 3 molds out, I realized it would actually be better if I had 6 molds to work with. So I ordered the extra silicone so we could make the extra molds. Once those come out, I'm just gonna line them all up on this board, and I'll just have a single station where I can pour 6 candles at a time. I'll put a link in the description to all the materials that I used in this project, as well as any tips or tricks I found along the way. I think for this inaugural color, I'm gonna go with bright yellow number 14. We'll just cross our fingers and see what happens. We won't really know what it looks like until it's cooled down and come out of the mold. Let's see if we can get a little preview. I'm not too upset about that. Okay, let's pour some wax. All right, well, it's had a chance to cool for a little while. I can tell already that I'm glad we put the cone on, but you can see how the wax is kind of dipped down into the bottom. That's because as it cooled, the wax got sucked down. So now I just got to pull it out and we can take a look at it. Okay, let's cross our fingers. All right, well, we've had a catastrophic failure. This was our first attempt and it split the candle all the way in half, which is kind of a bummer because this has been cooling for about 3 hours. All right, well, we'll pour another one. Maybe we'll let this one set up overnight and see if that makes a difference. Total bummer. Okay, it's been like 15 hours. So since the catastrophic failure of the last mold. So I poured some new ones. I'm gonna open one of them right now and see if it just needed longer to cool off or what. So I'm not even breaking out the big camera. I'm just doing this on my phone because honestly, I don't know if my fragile ego can take it if this doesn't work. But anyway, we'll figure it out. Here's what we're looking at. You know what? It feels a lot more solid. Be good to me. This is why we did all that finish work. I don't know if you can even see this. Look how nice those sides are. It's like you can see the reflection. Cool. That makes me happy. Well, we did it. We said we were going to make a product and we followed through. And man, was this a lot of work. I can't believe how much it takes just to make one single candle. We ran into a ton of problems along the way, had to figure things out, start, stop again. But in the end, I think we got a good result. Take a look at those beauties. So I packaged them up as 6 individual candles that form a 2x3. I felt like this was a good number because it means you could burn a few candles, but also still have some extras just for show. And it also just looks nice in the box. So far I've only poured 2 colors. I poured the yellow, which came out great, and then I poured the blue, which has some weird bubbles that are happening on the surface, so add that to the list of things to figure out. I'm gonna pour some more colors and hopefully those will come out better. But I'm really excited about how everything came out. I'm really looking forward to sharing this with you guys. As I said, this was a lot more work than I anticipated, so I think I'm only gonna do a run of 10, but I'll make these available on the website. I'll put the link down in the description. I got a lot more colors to try out, so there should be some different options to choose from. We'll see. I'd also like to make one more box and round that up to 11, partly because prime numbers are cool, but also because I'd really love to give one of these away. So if you share this video, write in the comments, nerd candy, and I'll randomly select one of the comment writers and I'll send you a box, as long as you're in the US. Or if you're in Denmark and you're at LEGO headquarters, I'll send it there also. Ultimately, I learned a lot in this process. There's so much that goes into making a product, from coming up with the idea, making prototypes, figuring out manufacturing, figuring out packaging. Like, I've got so much respect for the people who can do this for a living. That being said, I don't have a lot of interest in being the next candle magnate, so I probably will limit these to short runs. Whenever they are, I'll let you guys know if there's a new batch on the website. This has been a lot of fun, but honestly, I'm glad that things are wrapping up. I got some new ideas for our next video. I'm looking forward to share those with you. So as always, push all the buttons and I'll see you in the next one.